There is a silent magnetism emanating from certain women, a force that doesn't need fanfare to be noticed, but which reorganizes any environment. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, dedicated decades to understanding what we call the sacred feminine, that essence that transcends the persona and plunges into the deep waters of the unconscious. Having high spiritual power doesn't mean having magical abilities, but rather possessing an integrated consciousness that has already confronted its own shadow and returned with the light of self-knowledge. These women carry a confidence that many mistake for arrogance, when in reality it is simply the clarity of someone who no longer depends on the approval of others. They inhabit their own bodies as if they were sacred temples, emitting a frequency of peace that destabilizes toxic patterns and social lies. The secret of this hidden power lies in the ability to transform exhausting experiences into fertilizer for a wisdom that shines through their eyes with a serene and unwavering authority. For Jung, the woman who accesses her high spiritual power is one who has initiated the individuation process, becoming a unique being unreachable by external manipulations. She understands that her vital energy is a limited and sacred resource. Therefore, she does not allow emotional vampires or immature minds to profane her inner garden. This spiritual awakening does not happen without first going through a profound turning point, a moment of rebirth where old masks fall to give way to truth. The modern world tries to standardize the feminine soul, but the spiritual woman resists, maintaining her connection with the self, the divine center of the psyche. Every step she takes is guided by an inner compass that ignores fads and focuses on the eternity of constant and conscious maturation. It is a kind of silent force that protects and heals, acting as a natural filter that attracts clarity and wards off emotional chaos. The souls of these women function like an alchemical workshop, where the lead of past disappointments has been transmuted into the gold of higher consciousness and integrated into the whole. They do not shy away from internal conflicts, for they know that it is in confronting what hurts that true liberation and the reconstruction of identity are consolidated. Spiritual power is, in essence, the ability to maintain one's psychic center of gravity within oneself, even when the world around collapses. They possess keen discernment, an instinctive intelligence that identifies a lack of empathy even before it manifests in concrete actions. This prophetic perception is what makes them figures as fascinating as they are intimidating to those who still inhabit the desert of profound unconsciousness. The powerful aura of a spiritual woman is the seal of her victory over the illusions of the ego and the announcement of her divine sovereignty. Often, a woman with high spiritual power is one who has survived harsh patterns of control and transformed her reconstruction into a manifesto of life and brilliance. She no longer carries the weight of the past on her shoulders, but uses the scars as maps of wisdom that guide others out of the emotional fog. Jung believed that the feminine was the link between the material and spiritual worlds, and when this connection is strong, the woman becomes a channel of transformation. Her presence communicates that the final phase of silencing is over, and that now her voice inhabits the clarity of full and unwavering spiritual authority. She does not seek to save anyone, but her mere existence is an invitation for all who cross her path to seek their own healing and awakening. The beauty she emanates does not fade with time, for it is nourished by the eternal source of a soul that has forgiven itself and rebuilt itself with integrity. This guide will reveal the signs that Jung identified as milestones of this profound spiritual evolution, characteristics that most people ignore or cannot explain. By recognizing these signs, you will be able to identify this strength within yourself, or understand why certain women possess a magnetism that time cannot erase. It is a journey back home, to the home of the soul, where peace and transformation are the only laws that govern every thought and feeling. Be prepared to look inward, for spiritual power is not something acquired externally, but something awakened when we decide to honor our essence. The spiritual woman is the architect of her destiny, and the secret of her glory lies in the absolute harmony between her inner light and her actions in the world. Let's explore together how this higher consciousness manifests in daily life, and why it is the ultimate shield against darkness. The first hidden sign of a woman with high spiritual power is absolute mastery over her silence, used not as passivity, but as a tool of sovereignty. She understands that silence is the womb of all profound transformation, and that not everyone possesses the necessary maturity to hear their true voice. Jung explained that silence allows others' projections to hit a barrier of truth and return to the sender, without shaking the center of the conscious woman. When you stop explaining yourself to manipulators or emotionally immature people, you retain your vitality and preserve your aura of peace intact. This sign communicates that your mind is sacred territory and that access to it is a privilege reserved only for those who honor reciprocity and integrity. If you feel that your sensitivity is a compass for awakening and you wish to strengthen your healing journey, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell now. This selective silence is the result of an internal reconstruction, where the woman realized that words wasted on those who don't want to listen are merely drains of vital energy. She observes more than she speaks, because her intuition acts like a high-precision radar, detecting toxic patterns in the first subtle and hidden signs. By not reacting impulsively to provocations or disrespect, she demonstrates a self-respect that imposes automatic and non-negotiable limits on the world. Spiritual maturity teaches that the best response to a lack of empathy is the strategic withdrawal of one's presence and precious attention. For Jung, this withdrawal is essential to nourish the self, allowing the inner light to become so dense that no external shadow can obscure its brilliance. Why silence is the mark of someone who has already won the war against the ego's need to always be right or validated by others. A woman with spiritual power uses stillness to process reality, transforming each emotional impact into a clarity that guides her next steps with confidence and purpose. She doesn't engage in circular arguments or dialogues that only seek emotional control, because she understands that her peace is the foundation of her silent and radiant strength. Her silence is filled with a presence that demands that the other also find themselves, acting as a mirror that reflects unspoken intentions. This sign is rare because current society rewards noise and constant exposure, while the spiritual soul prefers the depth of the hidden and the essential. The reconstruction of her identity involves clearing unnecessary mental noise, allowing the voice of intuition to be heard with absolute clarity in every daily choice. She is the guardian of her own mystery, revealing only what is noble and inspiring to those who seek true awakening. Often this silence is interpreted as coldness by superficial minds, but for those initiated into Jungian psychology, it is the ultimate sign of dignity and psychic integration. The conscious woman knows that truth does not need aggressive defense, for it sustains itself through integrity and clear boundaries. By embracing this sign, she definitively breaks with the cycle of emotional begging and begins to inhabit the abundance of her own sovereign and complete being. The closure of abusive cycles becomes lighter when silence acts as the final point of a story that no longer deserves another paragraph in her life. The powerful aura is nourished by this sacred recollection, where the soul purifies itself from past invasions and prepares for new and glorious beginnings of light. Silence is her throne, and from it she governs her existence with a wisdom that emanates from eternity. Cultivating wise silence requires courage to face the void it creates, but it is in this void that the sacred feminine finds its most potent and transformative voice. The spiritual woman does not fear the void, for she knows that it is the space where higher consciousness manifests itself without the interference of social masks. She has learned that spiritual authority is not conquered by shouting, but by the consistency of her unwavering peace in the face of any attempt at psychological pressure. The reconstruction of her path reaches a new level when she decides that her word will only be delivered to the fertile ground of truth and mutual respect. This hidden sign is the first step towards total liberation, where the soul becomes immune to the lies of the world and focused only on divine awakening. Her silent presence is a manifesto of self-respect, an invitation for all who seek healing to also learn the value of sovereign stillness. The second hidden sign of high spiritual power lies in the courageous integration of the shadow, which Jung described as the act of looking at one's own darkness and acknowledging it. Women who reach this level do not try to be saints or perfect in the eyes of the world, because they understand that wholeness is far more valuable than the appearance of goodness. They accept their anger, their pain, and their history of overcoming, transforming each wounded fragment into a source of discernment and unwavering silent strength. By embracing all their aspects, they cease to be manipulable, because there are no longer blind spots that toxic minds can use to awaken guilt or doubt. The reconstruction of the soul reaches its fullness when the woman stops fighting against herself and begins to use her complete strength to shine in the present. This sign manifests itself in a radical authenticity where she does not ask permission to be who she is, acting with an integrity that disarms social lies. The integration of the shadow gives this woman a perspective that sees between the lines of human interactions, identifying emotional manipulation long before it takes root. Because she knows her own depths, she no longer allows herself to be seduced by masks of perfection or artificial charm that immature people often use for control. Spiritual maturity allows her to recognize the shadow of others with compassion, but without allowing this darkness to invade her sacred territory or undermine her peace. Jung taught that consciousness is the only real defense against the influences of the collective unconscious and manipulative minds that seek only emotional sustenance. The reconstruction of her life after exhausting patterns is based on this naked truth, where self-respect becomes the sovereign law governing her relationships and vital choices. She is a phoenix that has risen from the ashes of her own illusions, now inhabiting the clarity of one who knows herself deeply. This spiritual power manifests in the ability to say no with a firm elegance that leaves no room for toxic negotiations or feelings of undue responsibility. The integrated woman understands that being good does not mean being permissive, and that true love requires clear boundaries that protect the dignity of both involved. She closes cycles with an objectivity that frightens the indecisive, because her only loyalty is to the voice of herself and to the truth of her continuous awakening. By accepting her shadow, she recovers the vital energy that was previously spent on internal repressions and lies, directing it towards her own healing and spiritual transformation. The reconstruction of her joy is built on the rock of reality, where there is no longer room for fantasies of salvation or emotional dependencies that hinder the growth of the soul. Her authenticity is a beacon that illuminates the path for other women, proving that freedom is born from the total acceptance of our humanity. For Jung, the union of opposites within the psyche is the secret of ancient wisdom, and the woman who embodies this sign becomes a center of balance for herself. She is not shaken by superficial criticism, for her inner tribunal is governed by the clarity of one who has faced her greatest fears and emerged victorious from the ordeal. The powerful aura she emanates is dense and solid, reflecting a consciousness that does not fragment in the face of the storms of modern life or worldly social pressures. Spiritual rebirth occurs the moment she decides that all her experiences, including the most difficult ones, were essential stepping stones to her current greatness. She walks through the world with the tranquility of one who has nothing to hide and nothing to prove, which gives her a magnetism that time only reinforces. Her silent strength is proof that spiritual light shines brightest when it recognizes and integrates the shadows that once tried to obscure its sacred destiny. This woman's radical authenticity is the ultimate shield against disrespect, for she emanates a natural authority that demands integrity from anyone who approaches her orbit. She no longer seeks to be loved by all, preferring to be respected by those who have eyes to see the depth and truth of her mature character. The reconstruction of her trajectory reaches its final phase when she realizes that her greatest work of art is her own life, lived with awareness and absolute sovereignty. Each choice made based on her inner truth strengthens her connection with the self, making her spiritual power an inexhaustible source of peace and constant renewal. Jung would be contemplating the beauty of a soul that dared to look inward and found the universe, becoming the master of her own journey of healing and glory. To inhabit totality is the gift she gives herself every day, celebrating the liberation from all the patterns that once sought to silence and diminish her. The third hidden sign of high spiritual power is the activation of intuition as a sovereign compass guiding every decision of a conscious woman. Carl Jung saw intuition as one of the four functions of consciousness, the ability to perceive realities beyond the physical senses and the cold logic of human manipulation. Spiritual women possess an instinctive radar that alerts them to danger, disrespect, and lack of integrity long before any word is explicitly spoken. They learn to trust that butterflies in the stomach feeling and those subtle sensations that the body sends as protective signals against invasions of psychological and emotional boundaries. Restoring this inner voice is the fundamental step in rebuilding a free life, where the woman ceases to be deceived by empty promises and begins to see the essence. This inner oracle is the direct link to the self, offering a clarity that disarms any attempt at gaslighting or aggressive mental confusion. A powerful woman's intuition is nourished by silence and attentive observation, allowing her to navigate toxic environments without being contaminated by the frequency of others' despair. She understands that what is invisible to the eyes is often the most real, and her mature mind does not neglect the warnings emanating from the collective and sacred unconscious. Spiritual awakening brings the courage to act according to this inner vision, even if it means closing cycles that the world considers stable or socially successful. The reconstruction of the soul requires the woman to validate her own perception, ceasing to seek external proof for what her heart has already decreed as unshakable and divine truth. Jung explained that the soul speaks through images and feelings, and learning this language is the secret to an existence protected against the constant manipulations of immature minds. She becomes the prophetess of her own destiny, anticipating turning points and preparing the ground for a flourishing that honors her sacred vitality. This rare sign manifests in the tranquility with which she rejects paths that do not resonate with her integrity, even if they seem attractive from the perspective of her superficial persona. Her sovereign intuition allows her to identify malice disguised as care and lies painted with the colors of excessive and manipulative kindness in everyday life. Spiritual maturity teaches that our first responsibility is to fidelity to our own light, and intuition is the beacon that keeps that light pointed towards the north of clarity. By following her inner oracle, She deactivates the emotional hooks of the past, preventing old wounds from being used as gateways to new patterns of abusive control. The reconstruction of her peace reaches maturity when she realizes she no longer needs to explain herself to the world because her intuition is the only authority her self recognizes. She walks with the firmness of one who knows what she knows, inhabiting an inner security that time and experiences only strengthen and consolidate. For Jung, intuition was the channel through which creativity and healing flowed from the unconscious to manifest reality. And this woman is the open channel for these transformations. Her ability to read the energies around her makes her immune to tactics of psychological pressure, as she perceives the vibrational impact of another's intention long before the action materializes. The reconstruction of these women's life trajectories is guided by an ancient wisdom that seems to whisper secrets of rebirth and silent strength at each new crossroads of their journey. They no longer seek answers outside themselves, for they have discovered that the treasure of consciousness dwells in the silence of their own awakened and vigilant presence against human devaluation. This hidden power is what ensures that their awakening is lasting, creating a barrier of self-respect that no toxic pattern can definitively or successfully overcome. Her intuition is her shield and her sword, proof that she is the absolute master of her perception and clarity about all things in life. Cultivating this sign requires a woman to forgive herself for every time she ignored her instincts in the past, accepting that that period of silence was necessary for her current profound awakening. Restoring inner confidence is a daily ritual of self-love, where she chooses to listen to her center instead of the deafening noise of others' opinions and oppressive social pressures. The reconstruction culminates in the celebration of a spiritual intelligence that makes her unreachable by evil, for high spiritual power is, ultimately, the capacity to inhabit truth. She shines with an intensity born from this sacred connection, radiating a light that calms those who seek truth and repels those who seek shadow and the domination of others. Her intuition is the seal of her maturity, the guide to her freedom, and the guarantee that her path will always be illuminated by the light of the unwavering self. Inhabit your inner oracle, for it is the voice of your divinity calling you to a life of fullness and unconditional peace. The fourth hidden sign of high spiritual power is the achievement of wise indifference in the face of manipulation and disrespect from others, marking the definitive end of debilitating cycles. Carl Jung explained that the power of a complex or a toxic mind over us ends the moment we withdraw our emotional energy from it, leaving it hungry for reactions and control. The spiritual woman no longer wastes her vitality trying to understand or fix emotionally immature people who refuse to look honestly at their own shadow and the shadow of others. She has reached a stage of maturity where inner peace is non-negotiable, and any attempt to invade boundaries is met with serene detachment and a clarity that disarms manipulative minds. How have you been reacting to external provocations lately? Do you feel you already possess the silent strength of someone who no longer needs to defend themselves against attacks that don't define their essence? This wise indifference doesn't stem from a lack of feeling, but from an abundance of self-respect and the perception that her energy is too sacred a resource to be wasted on circular arguments. The reconstruction of the feminine soul reaches a new level when self-worth no longer depends on the distorted mirror that others try to project through constant and hostile devaluation in daily life. Spiritual maturity allows her to observe control tactics as mere noises in the wind, keeping her awakening intact and her emotional sovereignty fully protected. Jung pointed out that true liberation occurs when the individual becomes their own center of gravity, no longer orbiting around selfish needs or staged crises of people lacking empathy. This spiritual shift transforms the woman's countenance, bringing a lightness that is the hallmark of someone who has forgiven herself and freed herself from all the chains of the past. A woman with high spiritual power understands that forgiveness is an act of self-defense that cleanses her emotional field, allowing her to move on to new beginnings without carrying the ashes of what has already ended. She practices the closure of cycles with an elegance that intrigues those still trapped in hatred or resentment, because her wise indifference communicates that the other person has lost all relevance to her spiritual destiny. The reconstruction of her affective and social life is built on the foundation of reciprocity, where only what is noble and true is allowed to inhabit her circle of intimacy and sacred trust. This hidden sign is the supreme shield against disrespect, because the manipulator loses their target the moment the woman stops offering the energy of pain or indignation as a constant supply. She walks in the world with the dignity of one who knows that her light is innate and that no one has the power to extinguish it unless she herself surrenders the key to her inner home. In everyday life, this sign manifests itself in the ability to deal with frustrations and devaluation, with a calmness that disorients those who seek emotional reaction to reaffirm their false power over others. The reconstruction of this conscious woman's life trajectory is marked by a divine selectivity, where time is invested only in purposes that promote the transformation and flourishing of her full spiritual potential. Jung saw in wise indifference the sign of an ego integrated with the self, where the small personal will surrenders to the great will of the soul that seeks totality and unwavering peace. She no longer needs excuses from others to find her inner closure, for her own conscience is the sovereign tribunal that decreed her innocence and her total liberation from all past abuses. Her silent strength shines through her unwavering posture, communicating to the universe that the final phase of her ordeal has given way to the eternity of her real and constant maturation. Living with high spiritual power means inhabiting a level of consciousness where truth is felt in the bones and manipulation is perceived as a tragic immaturity of which we are no longer accomplices or psychic hostages. Reconstruction is complete when a woman realizes that her happiness is sovereign and that she possesses the perfect compass to navigate calm or stormy seas with the same integrity and clarity. Spiritual awakening is the discovery that the emotional desert was merely the soil where our unbreakable strength needed to be forged under the heat of truth and daily vigilant self-respect. The powerful aura of a conscious woman acts as a spiritual disinfectant, cleansing the environment of shadows and lies with the simple presence of her radiant and firm integrity. Follow your path with the certainty that your indifference to ego games is your greatest victory and the seal of your total emotional sovereignty over life. You are free, you are whole, and your peace is the non-negotiable testament to your permanent and divine transformation. The fifth rare sign of women with high spiritual power is the alchemical ability to transmute the impact of painful phases into a brilliant and regenerative life purpose for themselves and the world. Jung believed that suffering, when integrated with consciousness, becomes the most potent fuel for individuation and for the conquest of the ancient wisdom that inhabits the human collective unconscious. Instead of seeing herself as a perpetual victim of toxic experiences, this woman uses pain as a crack through which the light of her new consciousness can finally enter and reveal its sacred magnitude. The reconstruction of her soul reaches its peak when she realizes that each mark left by past disrespect was a forced invitation for her to awaken her own inner divinity and unbreakable strength. She does not hide her scars, but displays them as medals of honor from a silent war won against the denial and emotional manipulation of immature and seductive minds. This capacity for transmutation allows her to speak of her journey with a moral authority that calms those still trapped in the labyrinth of pain and inspires the awakening of other women trapped in patterns of control. The reconstruction of inner peace in these conscious women is an act of sacred rebellion against a system that seeks to diminish feminine value and silence the silent force of truth and spiritual justice. Jung explained that the spiritualized soul is one that has found the hidden meaning in trials, transforming "why this happened to me" into "so that I became who I am through this today." Spiritual maturity teaches that nothing is wasted in the economy of the self, and that mourning the former identity is the necessary birth for the emergence of a fully fledged emotional sovereign. The powerful aura of those who transmute pain is felt as a comforting warmth for the righteous and as a purifying fire that repels manipulative minds from the very first contact. The spiritual woman uses her story of reconstruction to establish relationships based on depth and genuine reciprocity, not allowing the shadow of the past to cloud the clarity of her new choices and boundaries. She understands that her transformation is a gift to the universe and that her vitality should be directed towards purposes that honor life and promote the collective healing of ancestral and social wounds. Jung saw the individuation process as the goal of existence, and this woman lives this purpose with an intensity that overflows in every gesture of self-respect and in every sovereign boundary imposed with gentleness. She no longer seeks to fill existential voids outside herself, for she has discovered that her own soul is an inexhaustible ocean of meaning, clarity, and permanent positive transformations in her journey. Liberation occurs when pain ceases to be a burden and becomes the lantern that illuminates the dark corners of the world, announcing that rebirth is possible for all who choose the light of truth. For Jung, the union between bitter experience and enlightened consciousness created alchemical gold, a wisdom that cannot be bought in books but is conquered in the desert of solitary and steadfast personal reconstruction. The woman with high spiritual power inhabits this final stage of integration, where every painful memory has been purified by radical acceptance and the unwavering strength of her new, sovereign, and complete awakening. She looks at those who once tried to manipulate her not with hatred, but with the wise distance of one who recognizes an old character in a theater that no longer has their involvement or audience. The reconstruction of joy is now built on foundations of absolute integrity, ensuring that her new life is rich in noble purposes and free from all the chains that kept her under pressure. Her healing journey is her most precious legacy, a testament to the fact that self-respect is the key that opens all doors to emotional fulfillment and eternal spiritual glory. The transmutation of pain into purpose is the sign that a woman has become master of her own psyche, governing her path with the wisdom of a queen who has integrated light and shadow with mastery and absolute courage. The reconstruction of her path reaches excellence when she realizes that her vitality is the engine of a silent revolution that begins in her own heart and expands vigorously to the entire surrounding environment. She walks in the world with the posture of one who knows her divine origin and her destiny of light, not allowing worldly shadows to diminish her brilliance or question her non-negotiable sovereignty over herself. Spiritual maturity is the crowning achievement of this process, where the pain of the past becomes the crown of wisdom that she carries with humility and silent strength before the mysteries of awakened life. Feel your strength, recognize your purpose, and shine with the certainty that your healing is the greatest affirmation of your high spiritual power and your sacred value. You have been reborn to inhabit the glory of your truth and the peace of your eternal and unconditional liberation. The sixth hidden sign, and perhaps the rarest, of high spiritual power is the direct and unwavering connection a woman establishes with her inner divine source, becoming immune to the need for external approval. Carl Jung described this stage as the apex of individuation, where the ego finally bows to the self and the individual ceases to seek in the world what can only be found in the stillness of their integrated soul. Women who inhabit this spiritual power do not negotiate their truth in exchange for belonging or fleeting security offered by worldly social systems or manipulative and meaningless minds. They understand that their value is intrinsic and sacred, emanating from their eternal essence and not from the fluctuations of others' opinions that seek only to control and silence the conscious feminine. Have you ever experienced that turning point where what others think completely loses its power to destabilize your peace? Share your experience below to strengthen our awakening collective energy. This independence from the approval of others is the ultimate shield against disrespect, because the manipulator loses their greatest weapon, the threat of devaluation or emotional abandonment against the awakened victim. Spiritual maturity confers upon this woman an authority born from radical honesty with herself, allowing her to navigate turbulent waters with a calmness that disorients those who inhabit the surface of existence. The reconstruction of her identity is now dictated by the universal laws of integrity and self-respect, and not by the scripts of inadequacy that immature minds have tried to imprint on her consciousness in the past. Jung saw in this sovereignty the manifestation of the divine in the human being, a light that does not need external mirrors to shine, because it is nourished by the inexhaustible source of higher and full consciousness. She inhabits her own psychic center of gravity, becoming unreachable by psychological pressures or mental games that seek only to consume her vitality and clarity of purpose and sacred life. Living in direct connection with the self allows this woman to close cycles with a firmness that doesn't allow for return, because she recognizes that doors closed to disrespect are windows open to new spiritual glories on her journey. The reconstruction of the feminine soul requires this strategic withdrawal from the need to be understood by everyone, focusing only on fidelity to her own inner voice and sacred oracle of profound discernment. Maturation teaches that solitude is not loneliness, but rather the sanctuary where the soul replenishes itself and where the divine voice speaks with absolute clarity about the next step in the journey of awakening. She does not fear social judgment, because she knows that her only responsibility is to the light she carries and to the transformative purpose that her existence represents in the fabric of universal life. This hidden sign is the foundation of her powerful aura, a frequency that attracts only connections based on real reciprocity and the depth of souls that also seek sovereign integrity. In Jungian psychology, a woman who achieves this emotional independence has become whole within herself, no longer seeking in others the halves that were missing, but generously sharing her fullness with the world. The reconstruction of her life reaches a level of excellence when joy ceases to be an external pursuit and becomes the natural aroma of her conscious presence, matured by undeniable truth. She observes the world with the eyes of someone who has seen through the veil of illusion and manipulation tactics, maintaining her peace as her greatest treasure and infallible compass in the face of time. The silent strength emanating from this connection with the source is what allows her to achieve continuous rebirths, overcoming each final stage of challenge with an elegance that inspires all seekers of true clarity. She is living proof that spiritual power is the only wealth that no one can steal, for it dwells in the silence of a heart that has forgiven itself and rebuilt itself with absolute integrity. To inhabit the highest spiritual power is to recognize that you are the only authority capable of defining your worth and your path of maturation and divine glory on earth and beyond. The reconstruction ended with the realization that the emotional desert of the past was merely the stage where your direct connection with the source needed to be forged and proven under the heat of absolute clarity. The powerful aura of an awakened woman communicates to the universe that she is ready to live her final phase with the dignity of one who has overcome all shadows and chosen to permanently inhabit the sovereign light. Jung would be at peace, seeing a soul that no longer fragments due to lack, but expands through consciousness and sacred self-respect in all its daily and profound acts. Your healing journey is the seal of your spiritual independence, the guarantee that your light will shine forever in the sky of your own unwavering and full consciousness for the new. You are free, you are sovereign, and your connection with the source is the ultimate secret of your eternal and restorative magnetism. The seventh hidden sign of high spiritual power is the paradoxical union between a sharp, instinctive intelligence and unwavering serenity, which Jung would describe as the full integration of the wild and conscious feminine. She possesses the wisdom of the serpent, capable of crawling through the shadows of reality and identifying the hidden plots of manipulative minds long before they attempt to invade her boundaries and peace. Nothing escapes her keen discernment as her spiritual radar picks up the vibration of indecency, allowing her to act with a protective strategy that is cold, logical, and absolute against disrespect. At the same time, she maintains the gentleness of the dove, an aura of profound calm that communicates that her strength does not need shouting, aggression, or childish displays of power to be respected. This balance between vigilance and peace is what makes her unreachable by toxic patterns, as she is astute in defending her sacred territory and gentle in emanating her regenerative vitality. This union of opposites allows a woman with high spiritual power to navigate draining relationships with surgical precision, deciding the exact moment to end a cycle without leaving traces of confusion or regret. She understands that her sensitivity is not a weakness, but rather a high-tech sensor that allows her to see what worldly and superficial eyes naively and carelessly ignore. The reconstruction of the feminine soul reaches its greatest power when this wisdom is used to nurture her own awakening and to ward off immature minds that seek only to dominate and exploit her divine light. Spiritual maturity teaches that being kind does not mean being permissive, and that true compassion requires establishing non-negotiable boundaries against lies and chronic emotional manipulation. Jung saw in this synthesis the birth of a new consciousness, where the woman becomes master of herself, governing her existence with the authority of one who integrates her shadow and her light with unwavering mastery. The powerful aura emanating from this woman is felt as a force field that organizes the environment, forcing truth to emerge and falsehood to retreat from her sovereign and clear presence over the facts. She does not fear confrontation, but prefers the victory of wise silence and strategic indifference, recognizing that her time is a divine resource that should not be wasted on useless and exhausting battles. The reconstruction of her path to spiritual glory is marked by this natural authority, where her mere presence establishes the standard of dignified treatment she demands from all beings who consciously cross her path. Maturation has brought the perception that her inner security is independent of the fluctuations of the outside world, allowing her to inhabit her magnitude with a humility that is, paradoxically, her greatest strength of complete self-respect. She is the personification of the poetic justice of the universe, where the pain of the past has been transmuted into prophetic wisdom that now guides her steps away from new deserts of devaluation and manipulation. In everyday life, this sign manifests itself in the tranquility with which she observes the chaos of others, offering help only when there is a genuine openness to reconstruction and to the mutual and honest maturation of the other's soul. She no longer allows herself to be drained by childish demands or by social pressures that seek to standardize her brilliance and reduce her feminine power to roles of utility and undue emotional servitude before others. The reconstruction of the feminine soul ends in the consolidation of this unwavering posture, where wisdom and gentleness walk hand in every word, silence, and action inspired by the sacred and divine self. Jung teaches us that the goal of life is totality, and inhabiting these hidden signs is evidence that the woman has reached her spiritual destiny of being free and sovereign over her own light. Her journey of overcoming is the legacy she offers to the world. A map of integrity that proves that consciousness is the ultimate shield against all the darkness of human ignorance. Inhabit your high spiritual power with the dignity of one who has already passed through fire and discovered that your essence is made of the same eternal substance as the stars and absolute truth before time. The reconstruction ended with the realization that you are invincible the moment you decide to honor your sacred feminine and no longer accept crumbs of affection that demand the silencing of your clarity and moral authority. Your powerful aura is the radiance of a soul that has found itself and has decided to be true to itself above any other connection or worldly and fleeting expectation of soulless minds. Awakening is your new reality, a constant vibration that attracts only what is noble and naturally repels what is toxic, ensuring that your peace is eternal and unconditional forever. Proceed with the wisdom of the serpent and the gentleness of the dove, for in your heart dwells the throne of a conscious queen who governs her destiny with the colors of freedom and sacred self-love. The secret is revealed. Your high spiritual power is your greatest protection and your eternal glory. The final stage of this journey is the establishment of the throne of inner sovereignty, where the woman assumes total command of her life narrative, free from emotional hooks or past deficiencies. Jung described the queen as the archetype of full spiritual authority, that part of the psyche that governs with justice, unwavering boundaries, and a direct connection to the universal sacred. When a woman reaches this high spiritual power, she realizes that the final phase of her pain was the ground where her crown of consciousness needed to be forged under the heat of each trial, overcome with self-respect. She no longer seeks external saviors, for she has discovered that her own soul is the savior she so desperately sought, while inhabiting the desert of others' manipulation and emotional silencing. Can you feel the weight of this crown of clarity on your chest, indicating that your epic rebirth is complete and your sovereignty has begun forever? Subscribe to the channel now to celebrate your total liberation. To inhabit this throne requires a woman to protect the boundaries of her inner kingdom with loving vigilance, ensuring that the sacred ground of her peace is never again profaned by lies or immature and manipulative minds. The reconstruction of the feminine soul culminates in the realization that her vitality is the fuel of her spiritual purpose, and that it must be guarded against those who seek only to consume her light without merit or reciprocity. Maturation teaches that sovereignty is the natural state of one who has integrated, allowing life to flow with a spontaneity that is the hallmark of profound healing and permanent conscious awakening. Jung saw in individuation the triumph of the self over the shadows of the ego, and the inner queen is the visible manifestation of this age-old victory in every daily choice of dignity and absolute moral authority. She walks in the world with the posture of one who knows her divine origin, acting as a beacon of integrity amidst the turbulent sea of worldly and superficial emotions. The victory of consciousness over the toxic patterns of the past is felt as a profound relief, a breath of freedom that disintegrates any attempt to return to external and aggressive emotional control. The spiritual woman now observes those who try to diminish her with distant compassion, recognizing that the greatest punishment of an immature mind is its own inability to inhabit the light of absolute and sacred truth. Her reconstruction has ended in the fullness of a being who no longer accepts crumbs of affection, but demands the totality of an encounter based on transparency and mutual and unconditional respect between souls. Spiritual maturity is the seal of her independence, transforming each scar of the past into a jewel of wisdom that shines through her powerful aura and serene magnetism before time. She is the architect of her own destiny, drawing each day with the colors of peace, constant transformation, and a self-love that nothing can definitively shake or corrupt. At this stage, high spiritual power manifests in a calmness that disarms storms, proving that the soul that has found itself has become unreachable by the attacks of others' unhealthy shadow. Awakening is now its permanent skin, an invisible armor of clarity that naturally repels disrespect and attracts circumstances that honor its new vibrational frequency of divine and full integrity. Jung teaches us that the end of one journey is the beginning of another, much deeper one, and inhabiting the throne of consciousness is an invitation to explore the eternity of our own essence, integrated with the self. The reconstruction of life reaches its glory when we realize that the universe conspired in favor of our maturation, using each emotional shock as a hammer that sculpted our true face of sovereignty and sacred light. Follow your path with the dignity of one who has won the greatest of all battles and taken their rightful place on the altar of awakened and victorious life. The inner queen governs with the wisdom that only the honest confrontation of pain can provide to the human spirit in search of its own divinity and total and permanent spiritual authority. The reconstruction culminated in the celebration of a life that now flourishes in gardens of self-respect, where the air is purified by truth and the soil is fertilized by the clarity of one who has forgiven and definitively freed herself. Her powerful aura is the announcement that a new woman has awakened, someone who no longer allows herself to be manipulated and who shines with the intensity of 1,000 suns in the sky of her own unwavering consciousness. High spiritual power is her inheritance, the infallible guide to an eternity of positive transformations and a peace that the world cannot give or take from her sovereign and real existence.